Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the ICT Educator webinar series. I'm Steve Wright. I'm statewide director of the California Community College ICT sector team. If you visit our website, you'll see our 10 regional directors throughout the state and our support team, which includes Nicole Sherman, the producer of this series, and Sean Monson, who often brings some extraordinary talent like today's guests. This series is open access and provided for the benefit of the California Community College faculty, deans, decision makers, department heads, and other related education groups. The series was developed to provide superior IT information with relevance to your campus, so you don't have to go to an expensive conference. If you register each week in advance on Friday at 10 a.m., you can just tune in for another exciting session. Here are some of the recent webinars we've had. Each webinar, like this one, is recorded, chapterized in the video, transcripted, along with the PowerPoint presentations and relevant links. Many of our faculty consider this an excellent resource to view at any time after it's recorded. Coming up in the next few weeks, we have October 25th. Let me see, I think we skip a week. That's right, because of the big conference. And then October 25th is CompTIA's Academy Partner Program. November 1st, Cybersecurity Dual Enrollment Pathway, and then on the 8th, really which ICT discipline makes the most sense to you. So that's some great stuff. Today, we're going to focus on the Haiku cyber range for cybersecurity training. And I was really intrigued by looking at the bios of both these presenters. I think we have a lot of expertise, kind of an overabundance of military and business and just a whole lot going on. I'm kind of wondering about this company and where it's going. So Justin, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about Centec and the product that you have, and we're really looking forward to it. So go ahead and take it away.
Excellent. Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Justin Parker. I'm a director here at Centec Global, and I'm also the director for the Haiku Cyber Range. Eric Basu, the CEO, was planning on joining the call today. Unfortunately, he had some travel issues that occurred at the last minute that basically have him on an airplane at this point in time. But he's very, very interested to see the recording of this, and he'll also be available to answer any follow-up questions and things like that as well. I've been with Centec Global now for 10 years. I hit it back in August. It was my first job out of the DoD. My initial background was actually not in the cybersecurity realm. I'm an engineer by training, a systems engineer and a systems architect. And through this course of being with Centec Global, I've moved up from, like I said, just on-site helping out intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance systems and command and control systems for various defense partners to moving into our commercial sector, providing cybersecurity solutions for commercial customers, and also now overseeing a division within the organization that manages government, DoD, commercial cybersecurity services, and now the Haiku Cyber Range. One other thing too, please feel free to ask questions throughout this presentation and throughout the demo I'm going to give of the Haiku range. We're obviously going to have opportunities for questions at the end too, but you're not going to throw me off my game if you guys interrupt or need some kind of clarification point. So the first slide is the very traditional cybersecurity we're going to scare the heck out of you slide. And anybody that's involved in cybersecurity or has situational awareness knows right now that things are pretty bad. Working with my customers in the various different government sectors, I'll tell you right now, for every dollar a hacker spends on trying to breach the government and the military and commercial sectors, spending about $1,000 right now. And that gets right back to the global cost of data breaches. And I'm not going to go through the laundry list of recent major data breaches that we've had. All you have to do is open up Google News and you'll probably find one that popped up today. The cybersecurity attacks are basically nonstop. 39 seconds is the data that we pulled here, but that's what we can tell. Everybody's very, very familiar with some state-sponsored hacking that we see going on right now with various countries. And the NSA points out that it usually takes on average a Russian hacker to about 19 minutes to infiltrate a network. Malware and ransomware attacks continue to escalate. I've had several commercial clients that have had the ransomware attacks, and once they've been grabbed, essentially at the end of the day, we essentially have to start their entire internal networks over again, or they have to pay the ransom attack. So it's already too late if that's already occurred. There's no putting Pandora back on the box, and that's becoming an incredibly lucrative international crime that continues to only escalate. The final box there is that by 2021, we anticipate there being 3.5 million cybersecurity jobs available that cannot be filled. I can tell you right now, from an industry perspective, cybersecurity engineer unemployment is at -5%. So already we're sitting at right now at 5% of the cybersecurity jobs that are critical to be filled are open just simply because we have the lack of personnel that can do the job. So from an educator standpoint, if you're in the education field for cybersecurity and you're training the next folks to come in and help with this problem, our hats off to you. We really, really, really need, as a country, to increase our cybersecurity capability and our defensive posture when it comes to that. It's not a joke. It's not a fear-mongering thing. It's a reality that we're dealing with right now. And I'm really excited to be talking to you guys today on how maybe we can help with some of the challenges that you guys face as educators when it comes to training cybersecurity personnel. Do anybody have any questions or anything with that? Or I can just keep going. So, okay. All right, so I think you asked, Steve, about our corporate background experience when it comes to this. So Syntec has been kind of at the forefront of cybersecurity, even back when we used to call it information assurance. The company has been around for 19 years, and in 2004, we won our very first prime cybersecurity support contract. And that contract is a contract that we still hold to this day. And what that means is that contract is specific to validation. So any system that the United States Navy puts online has to get accredited from a cybersecurity standpoint. And every single one of that systems goes through that contract that we have. So we literally see every single Department of Defense, Navy system or related system and help make sure its cybersecurity posture is where it's at. In addition to that one, we've held or currently hold over seven prime government cybersecurity contracts. We have a couple dozen commercial customers that we support right now. And we also work side by side with some education partners that I can talk about here in a little bit. Our performance on the services side of the house encompasses all level of cybersecurity. So we have folks that do everything from the network security side, folks that are running scans and patches and things like that, all the way up to we are currently writing the cybersecurity policy for the Defense Health Agency and everything in between of that. About 30% of our current billable workforce is cybersecurity, but if you actually include our engineering capability, which it makes up about 85% of the company, is either directly or indirectly involved with cybersecurity, because we have moved from a build it and then figure out cybersecurity later to you need to build it with cybersecurity involved with it. So every single one of our technical professionals is cybersecurity trained and works in cybersecurity best practices. And I'll talk about a little bit how we use the Haiku range for that. Just for a tagline, Gavini is a Washington, D.C. based assessor of corporate capabilities. And they released a report last year that said Syntec, even though we're only about 200 people, is actually the #2 cybersecurity experts in the entire Department of Defense. The only company that ended up ahead of us was Northrop Grumman. That's about, $20 billion more than us and several thousands of people. The big takeaway I want to take away from this slide is that from a background side of the house, we are not a product company per se. We are a engineering and cybersecurity services company that we came up with the Haiku range to actually meet a demand that we were seeing and solve a problem we were having. So with that being said, I'll go to the next slide, which is actually the problem. So one thing that we started seeing about 5 years ago is that our traditional interviewing process of scanning a resume, asking some, high-level questions was not getting us favorable results. and please do not take this as a knock to anybody's background, because, but what we were seeing is we'd have people that showed up, example, a woman showed up and she had a master's in cybersecurity. She literally had every single certification that we track. But when we got her at the command line of a computer, she actually did not know what to do. The certification and education process was great at testing, language and knowledge of high level book stuff. But when you got into the actual technical capability, we started running into some major challenges. And the next thing is that the cybersecurity skill set just continues to expand. I use the joke or the example that today you wouldn't just say, hey, I need an engineer. Somebody would say, okay, I need a mechanical engineer, I need a electrical engineer, something like that as well. Right now, the mindset is still, I need a cybersecurity engineer. And what I can tell you is that from a skill set perspective, it is rapidly approaching a level of specialization where the blanket term cybersecurity engineer actually really doesn't mean a lot anymore. And so it's changing a mindset from of that this is one person that can do everything to realistically what you really need is subject matter experts in different facets of cybersecurity. And what that goes into as well is that the knowledge required to actually master cybersecurity skill set also continues to grow. So what I mean by that is that if you have an expert pen tester, if they were an expert in pen testing a month ago and they didn't learn anything new in that next month, more than likely they're much less of an expert as well. So we're seeing an issue where the expansion of skill sets continues to grow and the depth within each of those skill sets continues to grow at an incredibly rapid pace. The next thing we ran into too is that we're still a relatively small company. We can't afford to build an entire server room with a bunch of different hardware and software that we're loading up into it as well. And then we absolutely don't want some folks learning how to do different types of cybersecurity or doing penetration testing on the open networks. So from an economic and safety standpoint, we had a challenge. We couldn't afford to build the physical hardware spaces and buy the software that we needed to do this on the scale that we needed. And we couldn't do it in a way that we wouldn't have potentially the FBI kicking down our door if folks were going in and suddenly start trying to use offensive cyber tools to test their pen testing skills or to test their defensive skills. And then the final issue is that we have personnel geographically dispersed literally throughout the entire world. So if I was able to overcome that economic challenge of creating this standalone network that could do every single thing that I wanted to do, that was adaptable and I could update every single second, I would still have to fly people in or do remote connections or some other way of getting people up to speed and trained on things as well, or testing potential candidates on what they were trying to do. So we sat in a room, we talked about it a while, and we actually looked at a bunch of different offerings out there, and none of them really met our needs. So we decided to build our own solution. So what's the solution? So we decided to go into a cloud-based solution. We currently leverage Amazon Web Services that allows us to create multiple type environments. And the technology that we created allows us to spin up and spin down as many different number of those environments on demand as we need to. So we've moved from a hardware footprint, buy, maintain lifecycle to a develop an environment build and take that environment and treat it like a utility. So if we're using it, we're paying for it after we developed it. If we're not using it, we're not paying for it. And that's the technology that's pretty hard. That we created, leveraging the AWS cloud as our hosting environment within that. We've also switched over to more of a gamification style of teaching. If you looked at a list of how to do Linux pen testing, you're going to see about 100 to 200 different things that somebody would have to learn how to do. So how do I take somebody that has zero pen testing and zero knowledgeability and go through a way that's engaging with them and that actually validates their skill set throughout it? So what we decided to do was break these things down into many little micro ranges and scenarios. So they might first start off at a command line that basically just teaches basic Linux commands, like how to open a directory, how to scan for IPs and things like that. And then once they've been able to complete that, they check off that range, and then it opens up a couple other ranges as well, like levels in a video game. And so from that aspect, I'm able to come up with a whole series of connected skill sets that by the time a person has got to the end of it, they now can not only know how to pen test, but they've demonstrated the capability of how to do that. I go back to the tailorable and quickly adaptable side of it as well. So we'll see new mandates or new security information come out for, say, a zero vulnerability. I can create a network, and this gets back to the safety side of the house, and I can actually load that malware into that network and show what happens when that occurs. So for our folks that are doing network security defense, we can actually record a video, or they can go in and actually see what happens if the network gets hit with this security vulnerability, so they're more prepared to fight against it. We can also do things like spin up a range, load malware into it with our current security configurations and see if it gets in, and then change those security configurations after the fact to make it, and then go to the actual operational network and make those changes and know that it's going to protect against that particular vulnerability. That's just an example of, tailorable and quickly adaptable. We have actually a relatively small development team. Once a range is created and that foundation is built in there, it's like a house. It's a lot easier to add, walls and different floors and stuff like that after you've created that initial foundation. So our development team is actually able to create these environments very, very quickly. And I'll give some examples of that as I go through this moving to the future. And then on top of that, once they've created that range, if there's something that a person wants to do, so for example, if you're teaching a class and you decide that you're going to use a range as a testing and validation environment one semester, you don't have to go back and create a whole new range for the next semester as the kids pass on all their notes to the students that are following after them, and you have to worry about that as well. You can just go into the existing range and make some changes, load up new versions of software, put in a couple different types of exploits or whatever, and now you have a totally different validation thing that didn't cost hardly any money to go ahead and update at that point in time. Does anybody have any questions about the solution side of the house? I could literally have spent this entire webinar talking about how Haiku works. I just wanted to kind of hit it at a high note before we get to the demo. Okay. All right, so how are we different? I've kind of talked about this first. First off, we're cloud-based. There are a handful of ranges out there that are cloud-based, but we were the first. So back to differentiators, said cloud-based. There are a couple of ranges that are starting to move towards a cloud-based solution, but we were the first that we were aware of as far as on a commercial cloud side of the house. While we do use Amazon Web Services, my cloud developers are actually capable of working in various other different types of clouds to include private clouds. We just use AWS because it's kind of the industry leader right now when it comes to scalability, which is my next bullet point, and availability. And that gets back to that unlimited ability to scale. So one of the examples I use when you talk about a cyber range is that from a conference room perspective. So I've essentially created a conference room for you, and if you want to have one meeting, you can have it in that one. If 1,000 meetings need to take place at the same time, I can replicate that conference room over and over and over again. And you're only paying for if you're actually using that conference room at that point in time. So it comes back to electricity or a utility kind of perspective. For the California Mayor's Cup Challenge, which I'll demo here, which Sean was involved with heavily. We had 1,300 students accessing the Haiku cyber range across the entire state of California in 13 geographical locations for 4 hours straight, and we didn't have a single drop. AWS is the same solution that Netflix uses to host and run their videos. And so if there's one person watching a movie or there's 1 million people watching a movie, the technology is able to scale in that way. I talked about gamification ad nauseum, so I'm not going to bring that up again unless anybody has some questions. And then the final one is enterprise solutions. So I talked a little bit about the gamification, and I'll talk about our offerings as well. But our enterprise solutions group is able to make custom ranges that meet a specific customer need. So the California Mayor's Cup competition is an example of it. Some of the Department of Defense things that we've done are an example of it, and some of the education offerings that we've done as well, which essentially allows us to make a tailorable range specifically for a customer base for them to use, like a private range that meets the requirements of whatever they're trying to teach, or multiple ranges within that. So back to get to a previous question is how have customers used the Haiku Cyber Range? So we just talked about students that have no experience with Linux whatsoever. So an environment familiarization side of the house. Since this is a web-based product that literally just doesn't require a plugin or any other kind of software, a teacher could be teaching a class either in person or remotely, pull up their login into the Cyber Range and display it on a screen and do point and clicking, and each individual student could also open up their own range and open up that particular thing and do that clicking and pointing along with the teacher. We can also embed videos into it as well. So the student's actually working with the actual software. It looks exactly and behaves exactly like the real environment for that period of time that they're using it. So just general familiarization, as you mentioned, how to do basic Linux commands, how to use technologies like Metasploit, which I'll show a demo of here in a second. That's a really just general powerful way that the range works great, in that you don't have to have somebody come to a lab or schedule lab time or whatever. They can access it whenever they need to and point and click and play around with it. If they screw something up, you just restart the range and they can start from baseline again. Red team versus blue team. This was a thing that Sean had mentioned. So, for example, a red team is an attacker. They're an ethical hacker, and they're trying to do attack kind of things like penetration testing and things like that. A blue team is a defense team, for lack of a better term. So they're going to try to defend a network against hacks. So let's say you have one class that is a security engineering course where they are learning how to do network security, and you have another class that's an ethical hacking class. You can create a range that's a raw network that you can have your security engineering class actually harden it, write policy, upload patches, set configurations to best security practices, NIST framework, things like that. And they can have a set determined time to do that. Then you can take that range and then give it over to the the ethical hacker class and see if they can penetrate it. And then they can run a pen test and build a results for that. So you can actually get tangible results, and you can use one range to train two different types of skill sets. Demonstrations, we've done anatomy of a hack videos before for various industry and education partners to actually show how a hack occurs, how a piece of software works. If you wanted to see something in your network from a product testing standpoint, and try something out and see how it behaves in your network, what it breaks or what it doesn't break, that's another thing that it works for as well. Governance is a big deal. We talk a lot about the sexy parts of cybersecurity, so like the penetration testing and the security engineering and going against bad guys with wearing hoods and listening to techno music. But a big, heavy part of cybersecurity is writing policy, developing processes and procedures, and following them and making sure they're being followed, that you're doing that daily cyber hygiene every single day. So from a governance standpoint, we've done things like set up a completely blank network, and the students have used that time to actually harden the network and write policy like they're an IT manager for a company on how that network is supposed to be secured and how the policies and procedures of how it should be acted with. And then finally, I mentioned skill set validation. That was our original need for the cybersecurity range. And typically we see these two different ways. One are the competition ones, which are fun, where we do capture the flag scenarios and students go into a range and they go for points. I'll demonstrate that here in a little bit. Or an actual test type of thing where, hey, you need to set something up, and then then the teacher can go afterwards and review their work and see if they actually followed all the processes and procedures that they would have to do for that. So those are just some examples. One of our challenges with Haiku is that it's like a challenge and a good thing is that we haven't found a lot yet that we can't do with it. I'm actually working right now to create a virtual ships bridge for a customer, and we're going to virtualize various different sensors and antennas that can feed data to it, so it can pretend like the ship is in the, anywhere in the world at some point in time, and they can have that type of activity occurring into it. So it's kind of like as far as your imagination can take it. We've had a really hard time finding stuff we can't do, for lack of a better term. Okay, so real quick, I'll go through offerings. I've kind of touched on this. So Haiku is actually releasing a business to consumer, which is more of a Netflix model, where it's a subscription-based model where we have ranges that are available for, professionals that want to learn how to do cybersecurity, students and things like that as well. And that the content, though, is set. So it kind of goes back to the Netflix thing. It's based on market demand. So I talked about that gamification and that penetration test skill set. That type of path will be in the business to consumer model, but it's not tailorable. We're just producing content, producing ranges, and we're building it through it. We get feedback from the users, and we're releasing things that people want to see. The enterprise solution I talked about as well as a custom environment for business, education, government, military, and we develop it based on customer requirements. So that's a much more traditional path of delivering a customized product for you. We can do custom front ends. So it could actually say the California Community College cyber range up front, and then maybe just a little tag in the bottom that says powered by Haiku, and then you have the ranges specifically for that course or that course of instruction for there as well. So here's some real quick customer feedback. This is all very, very recent. We had a customer who had a challenge with some of their, a DoD one with their Navy sailors not knowing how to do a patch and scan range. And so that was based out of an inspection that they basically failed. And so we, over the weekend, created an environment. We loaded the exact same software that they learned how to scan in, and we gave it to the customer the next week. And they were able to train all of those IT sailors how to actually do the scanning from their workstations in Washington and Tokyo, Japan, and all those places around the world. And it was turned around, like I said, in less than a week. The California State CIO attended the California Mayor's Cup Challenge, and she saw how well the platform worked for that, because she's seen a couple of them over different times. And then Lieutenant Commander Peyton Price has actually had us do a couple of different hackathons for the United States Navy. So we did one here in San Diego, and we did one in Korea, in South Korea, not North Korea, where we actually did that at a Korean Navy base using Korean Navy hardware, their laptops. And it was the first ever competition between United States and South Korea from a cybersecurity competition. And we flew out there to just kind of be there to help, but we brought no hardware with us or anything like that as well. And that went really, really well. And real quick, here's some of our partners. We use AWS, Attack IQ, ESET. ESET's actually asked us to test some of their products before they release them to market. So we've loaded up some of their software and firewalls and stuff like that into Haiku ranges, and then ran attack scripts against it to validate. And they've used that as validation that, hey, our product stops 99% of known vulnerabilities and things like that as well. Various different military partners. Eric sits on the board of the San Diego Cyber Center of Excellence. And we currently are partnered with the University of San Diego, and we're building a range for them right now for their Masters of Cybersecurity course as well. So with that being said, before I start my demo, were there any other questions or anything like that of what I presented? That was a lot of material, I know, that I covered in a relatively short period of time. Okay, all right. So let's get into the demo side of the house. Go ahead and end my show. And I will open up the demo. Okay, can everybody see the Haiku landing page? So once again, this is just through a URL. I haven't loaded any type of software in there, anything like that. and I'm going to just hit a login, and you get to a general login screen, username, password, very simple. And you log into the range, and you get, except this is our demo account, so we don't have a ton of stuff in here, but we have a basic message board. As you can see, we have different tutorials that we can click on if people want to learn how to use certain different types of tools. If they have an issue of contacting, we have a dashboard that allows people to track what they've done and what they haven't done. If you need to make any updates to your account, things like that as well. Right here we have our template select. I've only loaded up a couple different ranges in here, but if you click on a range, it'll give a environment description. I'm going to do the California Mayor's Cup one first, and we'll see how we're doing on time after that. I like to do this range because it's definitely one of our advanced ranges, and it really demonstrates some of the power of the tool and some of the different ideas that you can do with it. So real quick, I'll go ahead and open it up. As you can see, it just pops up immediately in a different window. I think the only thing that we've had people do sometimes is they have to disable their pop-up blocker, but that's pretty much it. Now within the range here, you see that we have a variety of different types of boxes. So these are what we did for the California Mayor's Cup Challenge is we actually created an entire virtualized United States power grid. And we have demonstrated that by having these servers for these different power grid regions. Another thing that we have here as well that's very unique to us is called the jump box. So I mentioned earlier that security is a great aspect within the Haiku cyber range, is that you've created a self-contained virtual environment that you can do anything you want to in, to include loading up viruses and other bad stuff, or do penetration testing and things like that. But in real world, I don't care how good your cybersecurity people say they are, they Google. And so a jump box actually allows us, and it's one of our technologies, to jump outside of the range and access the real internet and things like that without compromising the security of the box that you're in. So we use the jump box in the California Mayor's Cup to actually access the scorer server. So for this one, this was a competition that was for middle school and high school students, and it was particularly challenging because we had every single type of skill set that you could have, from, like I said, kids that literally just knew how to Google, all the way up to what I would call cybersecurity savants. And so we had a challenge when we did that, because we had to come up with an engaging 4-hour competition that would be good for all those different levels of skill sets. So we used a scoring server to create all different types of challenges and things like that as well. So the intro, one of the things too they wanted us to do was a lot of governance. So we gave a background, we gave a bunch of different documentation and paperwork. We essentially gave them a network policy for this imaginary power grid that we built. And within that, they have the introduction thing, which gives some overview that essentially they are a cybersecurity response team, and that over the next 48 hours, there's threats. There's a threat that's been deemed credible that's going to be attacking the nation's power grid. And they have some information that's come as well. And then throughout the challenge, they would get notifications that would pop up. So that was another way that we kept it engaging over 4 hours. We didn't just release all the information at once. It was like the real world scenario where new information is presented throughout the course of the event. So they would get these notifications and they would pop up. And as they popped up, new things and new information that they would need to be able to do different challenges occurred. So for the purposes of the demonstration, I've already unlocked all of the different challenges, but over the course of this event, about every 45 minutes, they would get another challenge that prompted them with new information and unlock new different types of challenges for them to do. So if I go to the challenges tab here, once again, we were trying to do it in a way that would drive them to learn how to use the range while they were using it, but at the same time, keep it in a game way. So this was just teaching them how to submit a flag. And it basically says we have 2 different types of questions. This, for this competition, the customer wanted us to teach basic cybersecurity knowledge, and also to test the ability to do forensics and other different types of cybersecurity activities within that. So we have two different types of flags and answers. So the flag is something that they would actually physically go into the range and find, and I'll demonstrate that here in a little bit. And answers that were text-based were based on their knowledge or their ability to go find knowledge as well. So it just kind of goes through example of that, like what is the current version of Windows Server that they're using. And then they have to actually enter a flag to unlock the thing. We also have hints as well to make it a little bit more. And we made it so that the hints cost points. But for this one, it's free. But for most of the challenges, people had hints that they could unlock, and that was something they had to work on as a team on whether or not they wanted to burn some of their points to try to solve something. So I'm going to go ahead and enter the flag here and hit submit, and I got it correct. And once I've done that, you can see that now all of the different challenges have been unlocked. And there's ones based on each region: MRO region, CIRC region, NCC region, WECC region, and then they have game, and then they have natural electrical grid as well. So if I go back to the actual range here, you can see that there's different servers for all those different regions that we talked about. And if they go to the intro slide and they get that visualization, they can kind of see where all these different places are around from a country perspective. So back into the challenges, I mentioned that that we did some just kind of basic ones to test cybersecurity knowledge. So ICS is basically pretty simple. What does ICS stand for? So this is aimed at the students that don't have a lot of cybersecurity knowledge, and they can kind of learn stuff while they're actually playing the game. And we can tailor the questions so if they answer it in all caps or if they don't put anything in there as well. Just out of curiosity, does anybody on the phone know what ICS stands for in the parlance of cybersecurity? All right, I'm getting a no across the board. So industrial control systems, or industrial control system, oops, is the answer to that. Submit, and correct. So I got 11 points for that, and it showed there as well. Another thing that we did here that I'm not demoing today is we actually had a live scoreboard that was actually broken out by competition region. So while the competition was going on, the proctors of the competition were able to display on a big screen the active scoring as it was going on through the competition. So you would see where your team was falling and things like that as well. We can also do that, obviously, for an instructor perspective, where you can have a scoring engine or something else you can log into and see your students' progress as they go through some kind of evaluation. Another good one to do that actually forces them into going into the range to learn something is the familiarization one. So within there, we have a familiarization that says, what is the name of the system monitoring the electrical grid? So this actually drives them into the range to actually learn how things are in there and learn how it's set up. So if I access the MRO manager, they'll see that we've actually we've added a Splunk tool in here, a piece of software. And we've run scripts in the background to make Splunk behave in a certain way. Now, each one of these IP addresses actually represents one of the different power stations throughout the entire nation. And as you can see here, there's different behaviors showing at once. So this one's showing up and showing down. Splunk is a tool that is very common that allows you to visualize your network activity. So it familiarizes students with something they would most likely see. Another fun thing that we did for this challenge as well, to make it as easy as possible, is we actually loaded up older versions of operating systems in here. So this is a Windows Server 2003. That is the type of stuff they would see if they went to a power station or some kind of municipal network. They're not going to see the latest and sexiest stuff. So it also teaches them to learn how to use different versions of operating systems and how they work as well. And this works exactly like it works in the real world. They can change the different time windows and get different types of displays as it goes on in real life. But that being said, the thing that monitors the grid is the nation's eye. So I'm going to go back here to my question and answer, and I'm going to go ahead and enter nation's I and hit submit, and I got it correct. So I got 26 points off of that. So that was just to show them how to go in there. So now we can do some more harder things that are going to test cybersecurity, different types of skills. So if I go into the NECC region, there's one called bad signals. Now this one's worth 88 points, so this is a pretty challenging thing. Your team has been tasked to investigate and find potential evidence relating to home away from home signaling units that people are using to intercept messages. You got some intel that somebody is intercepting messages between power stations, and your job is to go find out where that's at. You get some indicators that the threat actor is known to configure backdoors into systems, and this is letting them know that they're going to be looking for a flag like that. They can also unlock a hint as well. So for this one, it gives you an opportunity to say, are you sure you want to do this? It's going to cost you some points. I'm going to go ahead and click yes. And it says examine the open ports and services. So I'm going to go into, since I know this is in the NCC region, I'm going to go into the, I'm going to back out of here, and I'm going to go into the NCC terminal. So within the NCC terminal, I'm going to go ahead and open a command line, and I'm going to run a services command within the command line to get everything opened up here. So this is showing all the services that are running within this server right now. And as I scroll through here, I found something that looks kind of interesting. It says a backdoor service. So if I double click on that and I look at the description, there's my flag. So I've identified what service is allowing for this intercept message, and now I have the flag that I can go in here and enter into the bad signals and get those points. I'll do one other little quick technical one, just so you guys can see how we're using this for this game perspective. Let's see here, a good one to do is open ports. This is making sure that all ports and protocols are being properly utilized, and servers like this. I'm not going to unlock a hint this time because through my range familiarization, I saw that I have within this terminal right here a ZenMap server. So ZenMap is a scanning tool that's very common that most of your students will probably have some familiarization with or should have familiarization with. And based on the governance, I know the different target names for all of the servers on my network. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a scan on each server and see if there's any ports that kind of show up that look silly. So CERC, and this goes back to understanding proper ports and protocols. This is, like I said, a very advanced kind of question for those cybersecurity savants. And believe it or not, many students got this question right, or many different teams got it right. So I run CERC. There's nothing there that's really pointing out to me that could look weird. I'll run one on the WECC one, do a quick scan on that. There's nothing there, same ones as well. If I go to the MRO one though, and I run a quick scan, there's one showing here, it's 80, port 80 is open. And that's different, that doesn't make any sense. So let me go back here to the MRO manager, and I'm gonna click on that. And within the MRO manager, I'm going to take a look at my root file. So let's open up just my computer, and I'm going to access the root file and see if there's anything in there. And okay, there's this index file in there. It opens up in Chrome. There's my flag. So I've identified where that port is working at and where that's happening from that perspective. I've got my flag. I go in and do it. Another aspect behind this too is this requires teamwork. So if a team wants to, there were anywhere between 3 to 8 students working on a team, and they were all in their particular range at that point in time. So it also worked teamwork within there as well. What I saw the good teams do was saying, hey, Bob, you go in there and you scan this network and look for anything weird. You scan that one, you scan that one, you scan that one. And then they were able to go and work as a team to go find things as well. I obviously jumped to the quick one because I know where the answers are. But ideally, this kind of question should take, even a talented team anywhere between 20 minutes to a half an hour to try to work through and figure out. So that's really quick here, a demonstration of the CMCC range. Now we use this as a capture the flag scenario, but there's nothing that kept us from doing this as one of those other type of scenarios I talked about, a red team versus blue team where they could harden the network and somebody could try to penetrate it, a policy one where they literally get a raw network throughout the course of the semester. They actually write cybersecurity policy for that network and best practices. They can patch the old software, they can upload new software into it. All kinds of stuff like that as well is capable within this range. And just so you guys know, from a dollar standpoint, depending on how many students that you have, you're looking at anywhere between $10 to about $35 a day to run a range for a 24-hour period. AWS is neat though, is that it charges by the hour. So if your students are accessing this during the course of a 1-hour class, you're only paying for the time period that they're accessing it during that particular course. So just so you know from there. Are there any other questions about this one? I'll show a couple other little ranges real fast just for familiarization side of the house. Metasploit, sorry, I'll wait for questions if anybody has any. All right, and we're kind of getting tight on time here, so I'll just show this really fast.
Yeah, and I do, Justin, I do have a question. It's Steve, right? The next question anyone's going to have is like how much? And I'm glad you shared the cost per student. Is that the total cost going in and everything's accessible from any connected laptop or computer? I mean, how does this work in a student environment?
Yeah, so from a cost perspective, what we do typically is we sit down, and this is from an enterprise solutions perspective, and we get with the the customer essentially at the end of the day, and we say, okay, what are you trying to do here? It basically comes down to how long it's going to take us to develop it. There's a development cost associated with it. The CMCC range took us about 3 weeks to develop. And that development cost was about $10,000 per week to develop it. Once it's developed, then you're only paying for the utility side of the house. And the CMCC range at this scale right now cost about $30 a day. Now, one of the other neat things about AWS is you can essentially buy futures in it. So if you agree with AWS that you're going to be using this over the course of a year and you can pre-purchase a block of time, it can cut your operating costs down anywhere from 20 to up to 70%, depending on what type of appliances that you're using. So that's why I said, hey, this could actually cost about $10 a day to run from that perspective per student. And I've also had teachers come and kind of try to back us into it. It's like, hey, this is what we want to do, but we want the cost per student to be at or less than a textbook for a semester. So if you can keep what their cost would be about $200 and you can test these various different types of requirements and skill sets, then we can come up with a solution or attempt to come up with a solution that meets those needs. So from a cost perspective, it really depends on the complexity of the range, how many different servers that you guys are using, and how many different cores are within those servers that you need to do. I like to do the micro range offering if you're trying to test a variety of skill sets, because for this particular competition, we had all these different servers running and all these different services in the background for this 4-hour event. But let's say you wanted to teach that one thing I just showed with being able to scan open ports and protocols. You really only need one server with 1 or 2 cores to do that. And that cost can be $5 a day. And then once you've demonstrated that they can do the ZenMap thing and they know how to do it, then you do another little micro range along the way too. And then maybe at the end you have some kind of competition or overall skill set where you have a bigger range that's more expensive, but you're only using it for that period of time during testing. I apologize, I'm not trying to be like a roundabout answer, but for the enterprise solutions, it kind of depends. For the business to consumer side of the house, we're targeting a price range of about $35 per month. But once again, that content is going to be developed. You don't have control over what kind of content comes out of that. Does that make any sense?
Oh yeah, it's good to know the options. Those sound workable. I mean, obviously, if we were able to corral our interests statewide and look at a customized setting, that would be advantageous to do. Otherwise, your business to consumer might be advantageous because a lot of colleges just like to do it their own way. And that's always our challenge because even though we're a big organization of 112 or more colleges, they tell me, we all think differently, and we do not necessarily operate as a single buying entity at all. So it's good to know the options. That's very good. Thanks. If anybody has any other questions, you want to speak up now or write them in chat. We're reading. And
hey, Justin, it's Sean.
Hey, Sean.
Thanks for that. It was really interesting. I'm just thinking about how we might be able to use this in a classroom, and how easy is it. Let's say we were looking at a scenario where, generally speaking, at the community colleges, we have a lot of colleges now that are offering the Security Plus class, right, which is the basic intro security class. And then again, a lot of colleges that are offering the ethical hacking class, which either leads to a CEH certification or a Pen Test Plus certification. So the question is, how easy is it, or how easy would it be to try and create some labs around those types of curriculum, the Security Plus and the CEH or the Net or Pen Test Plus certifications for use in the classroom?
So Sean, I'm glad you asked that question. One of our business to consumer side of the house is we're actually going to complement the common certifications. So Security Plus, Certified Ethical Hacker, CISSP certifications, where that gets to our problem previously that I mentioned earlier is that you'd get folks that have these Security Plus and even ethical hackers that didn't actually know how to do a lot of stuff from a technical standpoint.
Right.
So we're going to build in training paths for each one of those type of things. So Security Plus go with the, for lack of a better term, the syllabus for everything that somebody's going to be learning during Security Plus, and then coming up with micro scenarios along the way that teach that skill set from a keyboard perspective, not just from a textbook perspective. So in short, to answer your question, it's relatively easy. The hard part for us, which is we have as a resource, is coming up with scenarios that are applicable and relevant to teach that skill set. With our heavy cybersecurity presence and personnel, coming up with those scenarios is actually very easy. But it also depends on the customer too. Do you have a scenario in your mind that you want us to do? And then it's, sitting back for it, or you just want to hand us a syllabus and say, hey, come up with scenarios that teach all these things along the way. We're pretty flexible when it comes to that kind of stuff. So it's pretty easy. It usually takes us anywhere between a week to 2 weeks of dev time to come up with something, depending on the complexity of it. Sometimes it's even only a couple days. And then, like I said earlier, once you have the foundation there, it's even faster because we're literally just adding stuff on top of it. So you can do those mini tests along the way, or you can treat it like a sandbox environment where you're building on top of it as you go, where, hey, I'm teaching one thing. Okay, they got that in there. Now I'm going to add something else to it as well and build upon that skill set in one particular range.
Justin, maybe I'm remembering that old movie, The Last Starfighter, but to what extent could students, not employees, but students like we see a lot, use your range as part of a course and actually get customized training for a particular employer? The biggest challenge we have, and you went through those numbers in the beginning of how many jobs there are and how great this need is, but still there's this huge gap of getting people in the field and working with employers. Do you have anything in the works to help that happen?
Yeah, I really appreciate you asking that question. We actually are working on that. From the business consumer side of the house, we're working on the badging thing. So once they complete an entire skill path, they get a badge, and that badge is I can't remember the framework for it, but it's something they can put on their LinkedIn profile. Our goal is to make Haiku a industry kind of test block as well, that somebody can go through, a student or somebody that's looking for a job, and be able to demonstrate, in addition to, hey, I have a Security Plus certification, I've also demonstrated my skill set of going through the Haiku Security Plus path and I've been certified through that path, and here's my badge to show that I can do it. So that's our way of being able to advertise employees. I mean, we're even looking at it as, you know, kind of a potential recruiting tool. And we've had recruiters talk to us as well of being able to say, hey, if somebody wants to be able to transmit their information to a recruiter of them demonstrating these skill sets by going through Haiku, can they sign up and do that? Now that's in further releases of our business to consumer, but it's definitely on our board as well.
Yeah, we're seeing a number of business models where recruiters under different business concepts end up helping students pay for education in order to qualify for jobs that they're actually being retained to fill through enterprise or government agencies. And so, I mean, to the extent that this becomes more complex, you know, we need to understand how our students can participate. And sounds like you might be beginning to look at that. But the key is to find out what is it they really want the student to know, because we're in a world where traditionally people look for degrees, and now increasingly, as you brought out, is the skill sets. Now, obviously, the answer is a little bit of both, but in order for students without a degree to qualify for a job, they need to have a pretty precise fit on the skill set. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I think that gets back to the challenge that we're running into right now, which is it's not well defined, right? We have these certifications that everybody agrees to, you know, Security Plus, Network Plus, Certified Ethical Hacker, things like that as well. There's one out, and I apologize, the name escapes me right now, that actually does require them to do hands-on demonstration, but that's a pretty high up one, a COSP. I apologize, I can't remember off the top of my head. But I do agree with that challenge that we're having right now, which is, yeah, there's not currently a governing body that says, yes, this person not only understands the textbook side of the house, but they've been able to demonstrate that skill set as well. And we're trying to fill that gap by doing this type of product along the health. I've got some questions from Alex on the side of the house. I do know that we're a little over time. Nicole, this is your show. I'm happy to stay and answer questions as long as you guys need me to, but it's up to you.
Yes, please. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so is it possible to provide MVP product review for prior to award? That came from Alex. I apologize. Can you expand upon what MVP product review is a little bit more? Or what we mean by MVP? Okay. All right. I'll do research and happily get back to you, Nicole, on that one. You know, the badges.
Hey guys, I apologize.
No problem.
Yeah, I'm here. I apologize. I just was seeking, or it took me a second to get to the unmute button. Yeah, I guess in the private sector, I'm actually a student at the American River Los Rios District Community College. And I believe this is kind of aimed at the community colleges, workforce development, and faculty. And I think it's also focused for the students. And correct me if I'm wrong, is this the appropriate room for me to be in to discuss these topics?
Yes, you're welcome.
Thank you so much. Just some of the questions I had were, I come from the private sector. I guess I'm an entrepreneur or lifetime practitioner. And some of the things that I mentioned in the questions real quick is things that would be relevant to my peers, myself, as well as, you know, I guess employees.
Okay, and Alex, I don't know if you cut off there.
Like Alex muted himself, or somebody muted him.
Yeah, so like I said, I'll go real quick here. You know, workforce development, CCC staff-specific programs, absolutely. That kind of gets into the, you know, enterprise solution side of the house. You know, we do internal workforce development with Haiku. If some kind of new policy mandate comes out or something like that as well, we often, more than not, spin up some kind of range to demonstrate that policy. We've had some discussions, although we haven't got all the way there yet, with various state agencies on, can we develop a workforce development or workforce testing. I don't like to use the word testing because sometimes when you deal with union side of the house, that can get kind of a dangerous territory. badges recognized by governing industry bodies or associations, we're working on it. It doesn't exist right now. So the idea is that, you know, if you bring it and you have the solution and everybody agrees it's a good idea, then they become recognized. So it's kind of a grassroots approach to it. We are talking about partnering with some of the larger governing entities like Security Plus and things like that as well. But I think that they're looking for feedback once we go the business to consumer side of the house. By the way, our business to consumer release 1 is scheduled to be out at the end of this year, if not beginning of next year. We're actually doing our beta testing on it right now. So I'll make sure that I let Nicole and Sean and Steve be aware when the business to consumer release actually comes live. And you can actually go to haikurange.com and sign up to be notified as well. Local enterprise technology, business partnerships, I think I just touched on that. And students test out to earn badges. Well, I mean, the test out process is demonstrating to be able to go through the path very quickly. You know, we're designing these paths that each micro range takes about, 20 minutes or less to go through. If somebody already knows how to do everything, it's kind of like playing Legend of Zelda. If you know how to go everywhere, you're going to finish that game in a few hours. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to spend days in there. So that's kind of our test out process that we're working with right now. And Martin's point, yes, that is an absolute challenge right now that I run into all the time. They want an entry-level person that's 2 to 3 years of background experience, and we're trying to tackle that with this as well. Of being able to say, hey, they have a Security Plus, they have this, and this person can demonstrate that they do all that stuff. Myself as an employer, I love bringing in no experience by a corporate standpoint employees that are all stars and talents. And what I'll tell you is right now is I'm seeing folks, this demand is so crazy right now that once you get your foot in the door of the cybersecurity mafia, for lack of a better term, and after a couple of years of experience, I'm having a hard time keeping these guys because folks are hiring them away at double their salary. It's crazy right now. And I know everybody's happy to see that. I think that the market is starting to warm up a little bit more towards having people with no actual corporate experience. I think that they're just looking for a solution that shows that they know exactly what they're doing. And like I said, we're hoping that the Haiku range can be one of those solutions.
Okay, and I think we're going to wrap it up with that. This has been really informative, Justin. And for those of you who have people that might have enjoyed seeing this, this is recorded and will be posted on our website in about late next week, along with the transcript and the slides. So it's a real advantage for you to share. We're going to skip next week, but we're going to come back on October 25th with how to save money on certifications with CompTIA's Academy Partner Program. That'll be interesting to a lot of you. All right. Well, Justin, thank you very much, and everybody else for participating today, and have a good day.
Thanks, folks. Appreciate it.